the main title, of course, is After Photography, but the subheading is What's Next? So who else is appropriate to ask to take the stage and share with us his first vision? Fred Ritchin.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Just to be clear, my interest is not really in what's the future of photography. My interest is in what's the future of the world, the future of the planet, the future of life, and how photography fits in to ameliorate it, to make it better, to make it more possible, to make things happen better. I was just at the Prix Pictet in Paris 2 nights ago, which is the environmental award, 100,000 Swiss francs, and Kofi Annan was describing the state of the world in terms of the droughts and the floods and the radioactivity and the oil spills and so on and so forth. And it's very, very clear that with 1 billion cell phone cameras in the world, with 60 billion photos on Facebook, 750 million images uploaded New Year's weekend alone, that it's not just enough to add photographs to the world, but we have to somehow add the world to the photographs and connect in ways that are useful and helpful. So that's the point for me. I think 100 years ago when they invented the automobile, if there was a What's Next conference, what people might have said with the automobile, would they have said that it would have been better for the automobile to be 2-cylinder, 4-cylinder, no more, or that you only certain times you can use it? Would they have kind of carbon credits at that point? If they did all those things for What's Next 100 years ago, right now there might not be this radiation in Japan, there wouldn't have been an oil spill in the Gulf. We would have avoided we would have normal seasons if people had asked those questions. So I don't think it's enough to just ask about the state of photography and how we make more images. I think we really have a responsibility to ask the bigger question of where we're going with all this. How can the photographs add and help? The argument for me, and because it's a 15-minute, I'll just start this way. In 1984, I published a piece for the New York Times Magazine, which you see the front page here. And the idea in '84, which was 6 years before Photoshop, was to ask the question, these were pixels. I wanted to introduce people to pixels, the idea that it's discrete segments, that the analog photograph is continuous. Somebody said that when you go up a hill in the analog world, you go from the bottom to the top like a vinyl record. You start at the beginning and you go to the end. But in the digital world, like on an iPod, you go from step 7 to step 2 to step 9. The pixel is the discrete. To me, it is not. When we call it digital photography, we're making a big mistake because it doesn't have very much to do with photography to me. It's different. It's like when the automobile was invented, we called it the horseless carriage because we didn't know what it was, but we still have the horsepower in our car, but the car has nothing to do with horses. And I think eventually we're going to find out that digital photography has very, very little to do with what we think of as photography. So, oops. So to me, it started in 1982 with this National Geographic cover. It was a horizontal image of the pyramids of Giza. They wanted a vertical, so they shifted one pyramid behind the other. And when I interviewed the editor-in-chief of the Geographic, he said, that's really nothing. All we did was go back in time and move the photographer a couple of meters to one side to get a different point of view by using a kind of Photoshop-like process. So in 1982, National Geographic was engaged in time travel. It was almost science fiction. In the United States, it's probably our most conservative magazine, but they were thinking in much more radical ways 30 years ago about what this medium can do. The same Newsday in 1994, it was a meeting of two ice skaters who were having a big conflict, and it said, Tanya and Nancy, to meet at practice. This is a photograph of the next day in 1994. So already we have news photography of the next day by very, very conservative publications. Here is the very famous one in 1994, where O.J. Simpson was arrested, accused of a double murder. On the left, that was a Los Angeles Police Department mugshot, and right was Time magazine, where the quote from the editor was, all we did was take a common mugshot and raise it to the level of art with no sacrifice to truth. So Time magazine already was saying this is art, is no sacrifice to truth in 1994. My point being that in these different publications, they were doing things we have not yet started to do in the artistic community and the documentary community. This was a Swedish airplane crash. 8 Finnish newspapers ran the news photograph of the crash. It's the first news photograph in history that I'm aware of where there was no photographer present and no camera present. So they just asked 3 eyewitnesses what happened, and they made the photograph. And I always thought with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, if somebody had just asked her what happened, we could have run the image and we wouldn't have thought about it for 2 years. We could have done other things. This is one, Lance Corporal Boudreau saved my dad, he rescued my sister. On the right, Lance Corporal Boudreau killed my dad, he knocked up my sister. On the left, I did a Freedom of Information Act for the United States military, and I asked them which one is true, which one is real. They did a 1-year investigation, and they don't know. So we're in a different era of the photograph. So the photograph itself no longer, that's why I wrote the book After Photography, it no longer has the automatic credibility that it used to have with all the problems of that. It's right now like writing with light, like when you write text, people can believe you or not, but they do not automatically believe you anymore. When you write with light, they can believe you or not, but they no longer automatically believe you at this point. So we tried to, 94, to come up with these new standards. On the left, it would be not a lens icon, which is like a copyright sign with all photographs that are manipulated in various ways. And on the right would be just the lens to show that it was an actual regular kind of photograph. We were told, and we did many, many conferences, TV, radio, and the picture editors from all the major publications told us, we don't need these signs, it's no problem, everybody knows the difference. If we had had these signs in '94, we would have had a much more credible photography at this point. The argument, I think, finally, is that people do not want to know what's going on in the world. People really do not want to know. It's much more comfortable to think maybe it's happening, maybe it's not happening. I don't have to do anything because we're not sure. If there's a fire in this room, we know there's a fire, we'll do something. But if there's a fire 3 streets away, maybe it's happening, maybe it's not happening. Libya, maybe it's happening. Japan, maybe it's happening. We do not have to do anything because the photograph does not have credibility anymore. I think as society, we're much happier that way. We also ruin the photographic credibility, and there's a major question in the what's next of what is the role of the professional for the future. It's very clear the amateur has a role. What is the role of the professional? One of the differences of the professional and the amateur, in some ways the only difference, and I'm trying to be provocative, is that the professional has the press pass. The amateur does not. But the professional is doing set-up photo opportunities. Mission accomplished, the war in Iraq is over. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, obviously it is not over. The amateur, the soldier photographs, if you look at the lack of iconic images, it's generally the amateur at this point that's making the important images. The amateur is more authentic, more believed. They don't have to fit the style of the publication. They don't repeat the same generic photographs. They do something different. Abu Ghraib, photographed by amateurs, by soldiers, is the most important imagery of the war in Iraq. The same in Iran with the street demonstrations last year. The most important imagery from Iran is by amateurs, not by professionals. Some people then give cameras, and we worked on a project in Iraq after the US invasion, and 10 disposable cameras were given to dentists, taxi drivers, students, and so on and so on. This is part of it. CNN did something like 7 minutes on our pictures. It cost, I think, $400 to do the project, but they could not, with all their professionals and millions of dollars, find out what was going on in Iraq because they had no access. Just give the cameras to the people, and they'll tell you what's happening. This we did for the United Nations, the Millennium Development Goals. This is a refugee camp in Uganda. We asked the people, the children, what's good, what's bad in your life? And this was one of the what's good. And I'm always impressed when people in refugee camps or people in different situations photograph themselves, they look so much happier than when outside people photograph them to make them look sad. There's a difference in terms of authenticity. We want them to look sad. It works well for our magazines. We feel better than them. We feel superior. As long as they suffer, we feel good. This is the World Press photo winning photograph. you know, it's affluent, rich Lebanese visiting after the Israeli bombardment. It turned out not to be true. They live there, those people. And I'm very, very interested with the young woman with the cell phone camera, her view of her neighborhood, not the outside photographer who doesn't speak Arabic, who doesn't know the culture, not his view. I'm interested in her view at this point. And with the web, these things are very, very possible to get at. Again, so now I'm going to tell you how do you attack, or in my opinion, how do you start building another photographic practice or post-photographic practice. Bush goes to Iraq on Thanksgiving, our big holiday, and he holds up a turkey which was for decoration. And everybody photographs it and runs it. In fact, we had somebody on assignment a little later, this is what they were eating. So one idea is that you show the first photograph, and on the web, underneath it, you show the second photograph. You undermine these photo opportunities, you undermine power, you resist the power, you do something different. This was the US invasion of Haiti to save it for democracy. We save everybody for democracy, obviously. But if the second picture is this picture, you realize to what extent it is staged, to what extent we do our foreign policy based upon staged, incorrect imagery, and why photography, in fact, has dug its own grave to a large extent. So this is a project we did in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Which is a very beautiful place. But again, we wanted to show that that's only one view. You know, cubism is a good thing. So if you roll over with the mouse, you start to see that the people who work in Gloucester, Massachusetts have a different life. That it's not just the tourist view, but there's something else going on there. So it's possible, just like Picasso, it's possible to start doing multiple points of view of the same situation. And it's very easy to do. It takes a few seconds to do. I've made this same talk many, many times in many journalistic places. All the editors say that's a great idea. Nobody I'm aware of has ever done this, but it's a very, very easy way to start to undermine power.